Hello everyone, Carlos Toro here, and guess who's back? Adrien Broner, the same guy who claimed he beat Manny Pacquiao in his last fight, despite the fact that Broner actually took two losses on that January 2019 evening. One to Manny Pacquiao, and one to Jim Gray in the post-fight interview. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about his comeback fight, a controversial decision against Jovanie Santiago back on February 20 in Uncasville, Connecticut on Showtime. Broner won that fight with a somewhat controversial decision of 115 to 112, 116 to 111, and 117 to 110, even though plenty of people actually said Santiago deserved to win the fight. So I figure I will take a crack at it and see if, in my opinion, the judges got it right. And I'm going to look at every round of the fight, score them, and briefly explain why I decided to score that way. I looked at the fight again earlier today on Monday and watched it with no sound, with no audio whatsoever. So these are my honest opinions and hopefully objective opinions of the fight. I'm not leaning towards one side or the other heading into the fight. I don't have a bias or anything like that. So these are my honest opinions of the fight. So feel free to give me your scores and why you scored it that way in the comments section below. I would love to hear what you guys think. So without further ado, here's Adrien Broner versus Jovanie Santiago rescored. So the first round, now the infamous round where two of the three judges actually scored the round in favor of Broner, despite the fact that CompuBox actually said that Broner did not land a single punch whatsoever. That is some Willie Pep shit right there. But let's be honest, neither guy did much of anything. Santiago only landed 3 punches, so it's not like he completely dominated that round. Both the guys threw jabs in small quantities, but at least Jovanie actually landed something that looked like it actually landed. He was throwing something that looked like it landed. He was busier in the round, even though he was kind of moving back a lot of times. I think that Broner was kind of waiting for Santiago to throw more at him so he could counter, but neither guy really did much of anything. Jovanie was a little bit busier. He was the one that actually landed punches, and I'm not going to go by CompuBox for every round, or for most rounds for that matter, but I figured, Jovanie was the only one who actually landed a punch, so I'm going to give that first round to Jovanie Santiago 10-9. Round 2, Broner's jab actually looked sharp. It was looking a little bit better. He was looking a little more confident compared to the second round. There was a little bit more activity, even though that's not really saying much. Broner was dodging some pretty good break right hooks from Jovanie Santiago. His head movement was looking good. I mean, movement-wise, Broner was looking better. He wasn't really throwing that much more than he did in the first round, but at the very least, Broner did kind of look like he took control, and his ring generalship was a little bit better this time around. Jovanie was the aggressor, but even though sometimes you throw more punches and you're the one moving forward, sometimes aggression can be ineffective. You can be moving forward, and there are times where it really doesn't do anything for you. I thought Broner won this one. I actually scored it for Broner 10-9. So 2 rounds in, Adrien Broner and Jovanie Santiago both had 19 points apiece, but that will soon quickly change because in round 3, Jovanie looked great. He looked way better in third round compared to the first 2 rounds. He was more aggressive, but it looked a lot better. He was fighting a little bit more on the inside, which was something that I noticed Broner was having a lot of trouble with during the entire fight, especially in that first half. Whenever Jovanie Santiago would go on the inside, pound away at the body, Broner didn't really do much. There were times where maybe Broner will get off a counter uppercut in here and there, but for most of the time, whenever Jovanie and Broner fought on the inside and at close range, Jovanie was the one getting the upper hand. Jovanie was pushing the pace in round 3. He was bringing Broner to the ropes. His forward movement, his aggression, his activity, work rate was really, really good compared to the first 2 rounds. So I gave that one to Jovanie 10-9. So Jovanie Santiago so far 29-28 on my personal scorecard. So round 4, Broner didn't really throw a lot in this round. He was kind of taking a lot of time circling around the ring, avoiding Jovani's punches. I think by that, thanks to the third round, I think Broner was starting to respect Jovanie Santiago because, Jovanie Santiago, his bodywork was looking good up to that point. Jovanie kept pushing Broner to the ropes. He was bullying him on the inside. He was the aggressor again. Work rate was really, really good, and I thought that this was the round where Jovanie looked maybe arguably at its best, but the problem here is that after the round, Jovanie, and really Adrien for as a matter of fact as well, both of these guys threw a punch after the bell, but Jovanie was the one that landed like the bigger punch, and I think the only one out of the two that actually connected, and so the judge deducted a point from Jovanie Santiago, which at the time, I thought that could have played a major role in the outcome of the fight. As it turns out, not really. It did not. But for the sake of who actually won the round, Jovanie won the round in my opinion, but it's a 9-9 round because of the point deduction. So by this point on my scorecard, 38-37. And in case you haven't noticed, on the right side of the screen, you will have a sort of a comparison round by round as to my scorecards and how all the three judges who scored the fight on Saturday also scored it round by round. So already, first four rounds, I should say, kind of pretty different scores across the page, if you ask me, when you compare my scorecard and the other three judges. So round 5, he was working on the inside. Jovanie, I should say. Jovanie was working on the inside early. Broner was moving a lot better. He was getting a better feel for Jovanie Santiago's timing. He was, Broner was looking pretty good as whenever Jovanie Santiago threw punches upstairs, and Broner was doing a good job dodging them. But he didn't really throw much. Broner was not really... He was really looking more to counterattack still, and he wasn't throwing a lot of combinations, barely any at all. He was not creating any chances to attack. He was just waiting for Jovanie to make a mistake, and by that point, Jovanie didn't really do a lot of mistakes. If anything, I would say that Jovanie probably should have dedicated the rest of the fight just working on the inside, because Broner was having a lot of time struggling with it. However, Jovanie was, had the bigger work rate, and Jovanie was the aggressor, and Jovanie did make sure Broner didn't do a whole lot in round 5, so I gave that round to Jovanie Santiago. So it's now 48-46 on my scorecard, and we're now about to reach the halfway point of the fight. Jovanie starts off by sort of cornering Adrien Broner and throwing a lot of big punches on the inside, and Broner was basically forced to fight on the defense, not just moving around, he just keeping his hands up and just making sure that Broner, that he just doesn't get hit with anything too big. He fought back a couple of times, but he wasn't able to really land anything that would garner Jovanie Santiago's attention. Jovanie's work rate, again, it was still solid. It was still good. Broner even kind of looked a little overwhelmed. Not a whole lot, but just bits and pieces in that round. Broner did land a good right uppercut that split Jovanie's guard late in the round, but it wasn't enough to overtake it on my scorecard. So it's now 10-9 for Jovanie Santiago in round 6. So it's now 58-55 on my scorecard. And funny enough, Steve Farhood, the unofficial scorer for Showtime of that night, actually, I think he and I scored the fight exactly the same way up to this point. And that was something that I kind of noticed when I was rewatching the fight again. And I thought it was a little funny. I was not looking at Steve Farhood's scorecard as a model for how I was going to score that fight. I just thought that the first 6 rounds were actually kind of cut and dry. I thought that Broner looked okay and looked good in that second round, but he didn't do much in rounds 1, 3 through 6. And I thought that it was pretty cut and dry, and this was a fairly easy first half to score. I'm not sure what some of the judges were looking at, especially those 2 judges that scored the first round for Broner. Makes no sense whatsoever. And again, granted, Jovanie Santiago did not do much in that first round, so it's not like he dominated, was landing like 20 punches or anything like that. So, regardless, I thought that this was a very good first half for Jovanie Santiago. The second half, completely different story. In round 7, this was a swing round in my opinion. I thought you could have scored this round either way for both of these guys. Jovanie and Adrien Broner, they threw jabs in the center of the ring for a little bit. It wasn't until mid in the round when Jovanie pushed Broner back into the corner, went back to fighting on the inside. However, Broner's counterpunching was a little bit more effective. He landed a couple of real good shots, a couple of good hooks that it was looking actually pretty good for Broner. It wasn't throwing anything major, but I thought as far as this clean punching is concerned, I thought this was arguably Broner's best round. You could argue that Jovanie Santiago's work rate and aggression still won that round out for him, but you can also make the case that Adrien Broner's cleaner punching, even if there weren't a whole lot of them, the cleaner punching was actually better and that he should have won the round. I have no problem with however you scored that round. I scored it for Jovanie Santiago 10-9, but I thought that you can easily score that round for Adrien Broner. And I thought this was maybe one of the couple of rounds where you can make an argument for both, and that could have easily tipped the scales in the favor of one fighter or the other. Round 8, this was when Broner really started to take over the fight. He was landing a lot better, landed a couple of really good hooks. One of them rocked Jovanie for a second, and his glove nearly touched the canvas. It did not. It almost did not, but it almost looked like Jovanie Santiago was going to get knocked down. And really, that was just kind of the major highlight of that round. Jovanie Santiago kind of started to stray away a little bit from fighting on the inside with just more focus on trying to land the jab and trying to set something up. But I thought that his aggression, I thought that the inside fighting he was doing and his forward movement was really winning him the fight. So he was starting to kind of get away with that, and that was starting to be the story of these next few rounds. And this is now going to be a bit of a trend. Adrien Broner wins round 8, so it's now 77-74 on my personal scorecard. Round 9, somewhat similar tale. Broner and Jovanie, they got tangled up a little bit on the inside, but Broner was able to defend well against Jovanie's punches. Jovanie kept moving forward, using the left jab, but not really doing a whole lot with it. Broner was landing a couple of quick right hands that did landed pretty solidly on Jovanie Santiago towards the end of the round. I scored that round for Adrien 10-9, and it's 86-84 on my personal scorecard. Broner looked a lot more confident. He was starting to get his rhythm back, his groove, and he kind of looked like he's starting to shake off the cobwebs a little bit. He still didn't look anywhere near the prime AB that we've seen years and years ago, but this was the best that we have seen Adrien Broner look in this entire fight from round 7 to 9 up to this point. I thought that Broner looked his best up to this point. And in round 10, Broner was stepping back. He was more focused in the early portion of trying to move around the ring and making Jovanie chase him. Jovanie wasn't really doing anything big and landing a whole lot, and Broner was connecting with the left jab, wasn't doing a whole lot either. But to this point, Jovanie was dealing with a cut above his left eye for a little bit. It didn't play a large role in the final result, but I wanted to sort of make mention of that. Broner was starting to look better. As far as the ring generalship, even though he wasn't the one pushing forward the work rate, he wasn't the one throwing all the punches. Jovanie Santiago still landed a lion's share of the punches as far as CompuBox is concerned. Broner looked like he was more in control of the fight. Now, you can take that for what you will, because again, the fight pretty much sucked. It was not a good fight whatsoever, but there is aggression, there is being forward, there is putting pressure on your opponent, and there is moving forward and trying to throw punches and missing them, and your overall attempt at putting pressure on your opponent being ineffective. And I think that's what was happening with Jovanie Santiago. Jovanie Santiago, he was chasing him. He was not cutting up the ring. He mostly stayed away from working on the inside and attacking with the body effectively. I think Broner was starting to catch on. Like I said, there were a few rounds where you could tell Adrien Broner was starting to get a feel for Santiago's rhythm and his timing, but I also think Jovanie Santiago did not do himself any favors in the second half of the fight. So round 11, it's very, very close up to this point. It's 95-94 on my scorecard, and we're now in the championship rounds. Jovanie started to press forward a little bit. He was missing a lot of his big punches, and they were pretty wide. Not a whole lot from Jovanie Santiago. Again, he pushed the work rate. He was doing well and moving forward and throwing punches, but as far as landing anything that actually connected and actually hurt Adrien Broner, not a whole lot in my opinion. But overall, I thought Broner was landing some solid shots, was not dominating the round per se. You can kind of make a case this was also a swing round. Round 11, I scored it for Adrien Broner 10-9, so it's 104 on my scorecard. And overall, I thought that round 7 and 11 especially, those are rounds that you can really make a case that you could have given it for either guy. So if you scored, let's say, so by this point, 11 rounds, if you've given this, it's 9 rounds apiece, 9 rounds total, and 5 or 4 of them you could give to one guy or the other, and those 2 rounds, the 7 and the 11, if you've given them to Jovanie Santiago and you gave the other 5 to him, then it doesn't matter what happens in the 12th round because Jovanie Santiago will win 114-113. And a lot of the rounds, they're close. So some of these rounds, they're not so easy to score, primarily the 7th and the 11th, but it's still hard to really fathom how you can defer a whole lot from the first half of the fight and also rounds 8 through 10. It's really confusing in my opinion. But round 12, I thought this was Jovanie Santiago's best round of the fight. He pressed the action from the very beginning, pushed the pace tremendously. Santiago was looking really, really good, landing a barrage of punches. I think this was the round that he landed the most punches in. It was something like 30-something punches. He almost threw 100 punches in this round, both of which were, the highest for a round in the fight for either guy, really. And he made Broner very uncomfortable. Broner could not do much against the pressure and the work rate and the inside work that Jovanie Santiago was pulling out. Jovanie was doing a lot of things well that he did in that first round, and I thought he maybe could have stole the fight if he had done that in the second half of the fight. But given how the judges actually scored the fight mostly in Adrien Broner's favor in the first half, I don't think that anything aside from a knockout would have really changed the outcome and made it in favor of Jovanie Santiago. Broner did not do much in the 12th round. All he could muster up are just a couple of single jabs and the occasional hook that landed on Jovanie Santiago, but Jovanie just completely outworked Adrien Broner in my opinion. This was an easy one to score. So Jovanie Santiago wins it on the 12th round, and he actually stole it. 114-113 in favor of Jovanie Santiago. Now, I don't have a problem if you scored the fight 114-113 in favor of Adrien Broner. I really don't. I can also see a 115-112 in favor of Jovanie Santiago. Even Abner Maris, who was calling the fight for Showtime, said, hey, listen, if you ask me, you could have scored it a draw, or you could have scored it for Jovanie Santiago. Steve Farhood had it the same score as I did, 114-113 Santiago. I got no problem. This was a competitive fight, but this was a dull fight. I did not, this was not very entertaining. I do not recommend you guys go out and watch it if you're bored and you just want a good fight on, because this was not. I highly recommend you go and watch the Miguel Burchell Oscar Valdez fight, or the Josh Kelly David Avanesian fight that also took place that day. I thought those were way better fights and way more dramatic and way more exciting. But if you actually want a good case study for how you would fare judging a fight that is uninteresting, but it presents a couple of schools of thought. Do you reward overall aggression, no matter how ineffective it may be at times? Or do you reward the cleaner punching, even though they were few and far in between? Do you reward defense and making your opponent miss? Because there were a couple of rounds where Jovanie Santiago was missing punches, and they were wide misses. He was missing punches by a country mile. But this is a good sort of test, I think, for anybody that wants to get into boxing judging, as far as how you would score a fight. Not every fight is going to end up being Ivan Baranchyk versus Jose Cepeda. There are going to be a lot of Adrien Broners versus Jovanie Santiago's where there are some rounds where it's tough to score. And I personally don't agree with any of the three judges in their final scores. I don't think you can give this, even in the absolute base case scenario, I think it's 114-113 to Adrien Broner. And on the flip side, 115-112, Jovanie Santiago is the most I think I would be more comfortable giving it to. I scored a 114-113 for Santiago. Again, I have no problem with Adrien Broner winning that fight if it's like 114-113. But when you're talking about 117-110, that's when you're starting to get into the whole, look, it was not even fair for Jovanie to begin with because, I mean, really, zero punches landed, and you still gave the round to Broner? I don't know. And again, punch stats don't mean everything. They do not. They have their time in place, but come on, you cannot argue with zero punches landed. You cannot. And overall, those are my thoughts on Adrien Broner versus Jovanie Santiago. What do you think? Do you believe that Adrien Broner deserved that win, or do you think that Jovanie Santiago deserved the nod and maybe was potentially robbed of a victory? If you want to use the word robbery, I'm not going to use that word robbery, but if that's how you feel, can't really stop you from expressing that opinion. But let me know what you know what you think in the comments below. Do you believe that Broner won? Do you believe that Santiago won? What are your scores? How did you score it? Why do you think one guy or the other won the fight? And if you want more videos, interviews, and even some special content that's coming your way fairly soon, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notified on my future videos. So without further ado, Carlos Toro here, and I will see you guys in the next one.